Welcome to the Enduring Minds podcast, part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. I'm one of your hosts, Jason, and I'll be joined shortly by Evan today. Enduring Minds is where we explore the intersection of mental health and endurance sports while breaking the silence surrounding men's mental health alongside the societal expectations and norms that discourage men from seeking help. We're here to have real, open, honest, and vulnerable conversations, creating a supportive space to share the struggles, victories, and everything in between that shapes who we are. So leave the shame, guilt, and fear at the door and join us for another episode of Enduring Minds. If you're new here, we are on our 12th episode. All previous episodes are on the Run Try Bike YouTube channel and on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network on your favorite podcast platform, alongside with 8 other incredible shows. So please be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and leave a comment, as that helps us grow the podcast and be able to tell more incredible stories. So without further ado, let me bring Evan onto the show. How are you, dude?
Just recovering in California after my unfortunate Tahoe 200 DNF.
Yeah, well, obviously this episode is we'll be talking to Michael Brydges, but we'll have to have a conversation about this maybe on the in between at some point about what it's like to train as much as you train, or any athlete, and then have something out of your control for when it's all said and done, pull you out of an event that you've worked so hard for.
Yeah, definitely early on too, which is unfortunate. But I'm in a good place. I kind of made peace with it all already, which is surprising to some people. But there's more to life than the outcomes, and I think that's the key for me.
Yeah, and I mean, it's exactly why we have this show. It's about turning the page after you've had the ability and the time to process, and then when it's time to turn the page, you turn the page on your time frame, not based on what somebody else thinks you should be doing.
Exactly.
So let's get into today's show. I'm excited, or we are excited, I should say, to be bringing Michael Brydges on. I met Michael a few months ago as he was preparing to head to Tokyo for the Tokyo Marathon, and I had the pleasure of interviewing him, which you can find on our website at runtrymag.com under the How It All Started tab. And when Michael says that running saved his life, he truly means it. And we're going to get into that during this conversation. I don't want to get into it now, and would rather have Michael share his story. So without any more time wasted, Michael Brydges, welcome to Enduring Minds.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Evan. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Mike.
So I thought I was over the nervousness of hosting Enduring Minds until just now, when my hands started to get sweaty. And I think it's because, Michael, we have a relationship, and we've had a couple of interviews, and we've exchanged conversations on social media. And I know how important this conversation is. And I want to do right by you and have a lot of respect for you. So I think that's where my clammy hands are coming from today.
No worries. I get nervous too, so I feel you.
So let's start from the beginning. I said that running saved your life, and you truly meant it. And I could, go through the story myself based on our conversations, but I want the audience to hear it from you, because oftentimes we throw that phrase around, running saved my life. And I don't think people mean it to the depths that you mean it. So would you mind sharing, how running saved your life, and the space you were in mentally to get
Absolutely.
to that point?
Definitely. Which is funny because I never expected running to save my life, any sport per se, because I grew up not being athletic at all. My brother and I were kind of polar opposites. He was into sports, still is into sports. You ask him any question about any Philly team, and he can give you any answer about whatever like nuanced thing you need to know about. Whereas I was more involved in music and arts, and actually went to college up in New York City originally to become a playwright, and to potentially get into acting if I could. But I've struggled with mental health issues for most of my life. I can kind of pinpoint when I was a kid of when I noticed that I was actually depressed, and it just kind of built up and up and up. And when I just turned 30 years old, and I had never really anticipated living until 30. I thought that either something was going to happen to me, or I was going to frankly take my life at some point, because I would get very depressed. And so when I hit 30, I felt like I had not really accomplished like anything worthwhile in my life. I had gone to school, I had gotten 2 college degrees, which is great, but in terms of like actual accomplishments, there's nothing that I could definitively say, be like, this is who I am, this is what I've done. And so I felt really lost and aimless in terms of where I was going when I hit that age. I felt like the way that I described it at the time was like I had walked off a cliff and I couldn't see the bottom. And so um, uh, I turned 30 in 2017, and then kind of a culmination of things happened in the beginning of 2018. One was I had gotten on this specific type of depression medication that started to cause me to have these really bad bouts of paranoia where I stopped sleeping, I stopped eating. I already wasn't physically active. I didn't take care of myself at all. Pretty much you would just find me at home sitting on my couch, either eating Domino's pizza or eating Domino's pizza and playing video games. Um, and it led up to in February 2018, I tried to take my life. And it was, I want to say that was like the life altering moment that made everything possible for where I am today, but it's really not. It's kind of one in like a domino effect of things that happened. But the one thing that I'll never forget, and I talk about this like every year on the anniversary of it, I always make a post on Facebook for my friends so that they know that they're not alone in their own struggles. But I remember when I was lying there. I don't want to get too graphic, but I was lying there on the ground, and there was blood, and I heard this voice in my head, and I'll never forget it because it definitely wasn't mine. It was a little whisper that said, "Not yet." And that voice is what caused me to get up and get help. I legitimately it was my arm. I wrapped my arm in t-shirts and I Ubered to the hospital. And I remember walking in and showing the doctor, and the doctor asked me, "Why did you do this?" And my only response was, "Because I'm sad." And so I spent a couple days in the psych ward, kind of trying to figure out my medication. I was lucky at the time because I was in this outpatient treatment program for therapy, and I've always been a big proponent of therapy. I've been in therapy for probably going on 15 years now, and so I got out of the hospital, and I decided kind of at that moment a couple different things. I realized the only person you're really stuck with for the rest of your life is you. And why do you want to spend every waking moment with that person hating them? And so I started to take my therapy seriously. I started to really do a lot of self reflection. I did a lot of meditation and learning about myself and trying to understand kind of where all of this negativity and all this depression came from. Uh, but then, of course, life had other plans. About a month later after that incident, I had my girlfriend who I was with for, I think we had just hit our 3-year anniversary. I thought I was going to marry her. She broke up with me because of everything that was going on. At the time, I understood because it was a lot. And then about a month after that, I lost my great uncle, who I grew up in a single parent household, just my mom. I don't know who my dad is. Well, I know who he is, but I've never met him. And I really only had 2 father figures in my life. One was my grandfather. Luckily, he's still alive, and his brother, my great uncle Hugh. And he was the first person in my life who told me that having a mental illness does not mean that you're broken. And he struggled with bipolar his whole life, and he talked about the importance of getting on medication. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's just that you need some extra help, and being able to reach out for help when you need it. He was the first male figure in my life ever who said something like that, and it hit me hard, and I've never forgotten it. I've never forgotten where we had the conversation, and what he told me. And so I was really, really hurt by that, really upset. And then a month later after that, I found out that I had an illness after I went to a doctor because I was having some issues. And he told me that I needed to have emergency surgery because I had something that could potentially become cancerous if I didn't get it taken care of. And basically for the rest of 2018 after that, I had one major surgery, and then I had a bunch of minor surgeries about every 2 weeks or so for the rest of the year, which was just excruciating and very painful. And when I had gone and done this, I decided maybe I should go to a primary doctor and just make sure everything else is okay. So I did, and found out that my blood pressure was incredibly high, like hypertension 2. Even the doctor was shocked because he was like, "You're 30 years old. There's no reason you should have high blood pressure this high." And he did every test in the book to try to find out what was going on before he came back and literally told me, you need to take care of yourself. You need to eat better. You need to be more active, or else you're going to have a massive heart attack or a massive stroke. And strokes run on the male side of my family. So that was kind of like, alarm bells are going off saying, okay, this is a real possibility now. And so all of those things, kind of one after another, is what caused me to start to take more action in my life. I was working on myself mentally, but then I knew at that moment I needed to start doing something for myself physically. And I went to, I lived in Queens at the time, and I went to, I remember the Rego Park, I lived in Rego Park, and I went to the Retro Fitness that had just opened up. And I walked in, took a look around. One side was all weights, the other side was all cardio. And I immediately said, I'm not going to the weights. Look at all those buff men over there. I feel really judged, and I will not fit in over there. And I didn't have the strength, the physical strength, to be able to obviously lift heavy things. So I looked over and I said, okay, let me get on the treadmill and see what I can do. I think I got about 30 seconds in before I felt like I was going to die, and I had to walk. But the one thing that I made a deal with myself on was, when you hit the start button on the treadmill, it just immediately started for 20 minutes. And I said, okay, let's make it a goal to run for 20 minutes without stopping. And if I can do that, that's a great accomplishment for me. So it took me, at least a month or two to be able to do that. And my pace was still relatively low, which, I personally don't care about. But the fact that I was able to get to that point, running 20 minutes without stopping, was a real eye-opening moment for me, where I started to realize that I was stronger than I thought I was. And it culminated in me telling myself, well, can I run a 5K? And so at this time, I was only running inside. I didn't want to run outside because it was, I felt like I was going to be judged. And two, I don't like running in the winter because I have Raynaud's, and my hands and my feet get very, very cold and lock up a lot during the cold weather. So I ran my first 5K, my first 10K, and my first 15K on the treadmill. And as I hit each one of those different milestones, I just kept thinking to myself, I never thought this was possible. It was something that I never considered myself an athlete. I never considered myself able to do really anything physically fit. The most I ever did was play, I think, a season of Little League baseball when I was like 10. And that was it. And sorry. Sorry, what was that?
I was going to say there's so much to unpack there. And I want to go back to something that you said out of the gate, because it's something that I have struggled with in my lifetime, and that's legacy. You mentioned that you had 2 college degrees, but nothing else to hang your hat on. And I arm wrestle with myself, Michael, almost regularly about legacy. Like, what am I leaving behind? And I wanted to ask you, because I know why legacy is important to me, but I wanted to ask you, why is legacy important to you?
So my 2 college degrees are in history and public administration, and I've studied historical figures my whole life, and the whole premise of why we remember them is legacy. And I just told myself I wanted to do something that would make people, when they thought about me, because death was on my mind a lot in 2018, just with everything that was happening. And I was saying to myself, if I were to leave today, I want people to be able to say, there's Mike Brydges. He did XYZ. I'll remember him for what he did here. And that was something that I wanted to try to have, for anything that I could be, have people be proud of me for. And no, there was something else that came to mind about that. I can't remember. Hopefully it comes back to me. But yeah, the idea of, you don't necessarily have to do something extraordinary, but just having something that people can remember you on. Now I remember. I always tell people that there's kind of 2 deaths that you die. One is obviously when you physically die, but the second is when the last time someone says your name, because generations pass, and people will talk about you, with your immediate family. But then as you move forward and they have their own family and then they have their own family, it becomes less likely that your name will be passed on and remembered. And, I wanted to make it so that potentially that gap in time would be, a little bit longer than just here's Mike Brydges. He got 2 college degrees. He worked in public service, and that was kind of it.
Yeah, like Jason said, like there's so many pieces of your story that again we're going to resonate with different aspects of it. Like for me, I went through my own mental health journey, PTSD, depression, anxiety. So I have my own story, and everybody's story is slightly different. We all, I think, from what I've heard you saying, like you've probably told this story probably more than a dozen times to several different people, different groups, different interviews, those types of things. And I think I want to go underneath the story because I really want people who are in these positions or thinking about maybe I'm going through something similar. What does it feel like in your body when you're going through this journey of, potentially taking your own life to the point of driving yourself to the hospital? Like, what does it actually feel like in your body? Because I don't think we talk about that aspect enough. We're really good at telling our stories, but we're not good about talking about the feelings associated with them.
Yeah. Oh, the feelings, the one thing that comes to mind first is heat. I feel very, very, very hot. I feel like there's a massive weight on my chest. Like I just can't move. And like I weigh 1,000 pounds and, like I'm just stuck and that there's no place to go. And also, the biggest thing for me that kind of led up to this event was I felt like so much was like there was so much noise going on around me, either inside my head or I felt like there was so much noise around me going on. And the biggest thought that I had was like, I just want it to stop. Like I just don't want to have to hear it anymore, whether it's my own negative thoughts, like other people around me, and just not. It's weird because a lot of people that are like in this position, they say, it's not that I want to die per se, it's that I just don't want to be here anymore. And a lot of people hear that and they'll think it's the same thing, but it's this whole idea of just like I don't want to be in this moment, I don't want to be in this feeling, and I just want it to go away. And that the only way to make it go away in that specific moment is to take end your life or what have you. And I the one thing that used to help me a lot, and it's a really bad thing that helped me, was I used to cut a lot. And that would in the moment help me with just releasing the emotion, because it was a lot of bottled up emotion, which is where that weight came from. And I didn't know how to get it out. I didn't know how to process it effectively. Really like stress how I was feeling. I couldn't get that out. It was just me getting mad at myself for not being able to understand how to get it out and understanding why I was feeling that way. Because I grew up a lot with people telling me, you have no reason to be sad. You have a house, you have food, you have clothing, like all of this stuff. So there's no reason to be upset. But the mind plays these tricks on us that we just don't understand. And in that moment when I was feeling that, it was just me being like, I want to escape all this. I just want to, I want to release all of it and get rid of it. And when I attempted, what's really weird is I had tried so hard up until that point to control everything in my life. I had tried to control what I was thinking, how I was responding to things. Like I just felt like I needed to steer my life in a specific direction. And in that moment though, there was a moment where I finally let go. It was like this release of just like control of like, I don't have control over this anymore. Like this is out of my hands. I need help. And one of the things I think, especially with men, is that we are taught, unfortunately, with society and toxic masculinity, that like you don't ask for help. You deal with your problems yourself, you work them out. And if you can't, here's your option. And I feel like once I attempted that moment, that feeling just kind of like went away, and I finally I gave in to needing help. And it was really refreshing in the moment. Like, a lot of people asked me, my mom asked me actually, a couple months ago, like, weren't those 3 days, that moment, wasn't that like the scariest moment in your life? And I joked and I was like, I mean, I lived in New York City. There's a lot more scary things that I dealt with. Um, but like in those 3 days, I felt so much calm. I felt safe, and I felt like people were trying to help me and take care of me. Um, and when I got out, I felt, obviously I still felt depressed, but I saw this glimmer of hope, and I decided, instead of migrating back to how I was like, why do I try to reach out and get it?
I think you described that in such a like beautiful and like difficult way for a lot of people who are probably hearing this, going like, I have a friend, a family member, somebody going through it the same way. And that's why I wanted you to describe it the way you felt, because I had very similar feelings where, again, like heart racing, sweats, like just so
Mhm.
many feelings in your body that you don't know how to manage. But like the thing that you were talking about is the choice that you made was that brought you some like calm and peace in it, which is like crazy to think. Like, you would think it would be the opposite, right? Like your mom said, like, I can't believe that must have been so scary. You're like, this is the calmest I've ever felt. Like,
Yeah.
and that's like a really, like, probably a harder place to be for a lot of us who have chosen not how to chosen not how to feel.
Yeah.
The one piece I just wanted to touch on, because I think when we talk about therapy, we say we go to therapy and we do these things, but not a lot of people truly understand like the different types of therapy that you can go to and the tools that you can be given.
Yep.
So when you are in those moments and you're going through depression and anxiety, that you're choosing, I'll say, like the positive things to work through. Like for me, like breath work was a massive
Mhm.
assist for the things that I was going through, and running on top of it. But could you just describe just a little bit about like some of the modalities of therapy that have helped you, and maybe just a couple of the tools? I'm sure we can get into more, but I'm just curious, like what versions of therapy you've been through that you find have been very helpful, because finding the right person is imperative when you're going through this.
Absolutely. And I love this question, because I love talking to people about different forms of therapy. Because a lot of people think you go to therapy, you just talk about your problems, and then that's kind of it. But I've done cognitive behavioral therapy, which is CBT therapy, which is where you try to kind of shift your mind in terms of the intrusive thoughts you have and about the negative thoughts you have, and understanding that you have the ability to change how you respond to things. My therapist and I talk about how I have a what's the word? It's a kind of a it's like this other voice in my head that's a um, uh, negative
I
Nancy,
call I
self
call that
talk.
my little liar.
He told me to give it a name, and so I called Donald Trump. Um, because he said come up with something ridiculous that you can say, like, look at what this is doing when you
Yeah.
have these negative thoughts and you talk bad about yourself. I was like, well, Donald Trump told me I was an asshole. um, and he laughed at that. But uh, I've worked on that, but the main thing that I've worked on the most, which I think has been the most helpful, is DBT therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy. And what that is being able to regulate your emotions, understand the duality of being in a mindset of being rational and being emotional, and finding the balance in that. And that focused a lot on uh, interactions and understanding how to get your point across to other people about what you want, without going into kind of an emotional response type of a response that you would give to the person. And it was difficult, because I'd kind of grown up not really knowing how to like stand up for myself and how to say exactly what I wanted, which is one of the things that fought me with like beat me up with my depression, was because I would want something, but I wouldn't know how to ask for it. And then because I didn't know how to ask for it and I didn't get it, I would be mad at myself for not knowing how to do it. And so a lot of that was I did a lot of group therapy. So we did a lot of practices working together. And I took classes specifically on meditation. So we would come in, We learned about Zen meditation. We learned about understanding, the breath work and understanding. Then we just sit there for 45 minutes with our eyes closed and just that's it. And the amount of people that were in that class that would be like, I can't do this. Like, this is impossible. 45 minutes of nothing. And it became really refreshing for me because, as a therapist would point out, you're sitting there in silence counting, and then eventually your mind goes blank, but then you don't feel it at the time. But what it does is it causes you to self reflect in a way that you just never thought possible. And you start to learn and understand yourself. And then, um, so I did DBT therapy for about 3 years or so with my therapy group that I was in. I did individual therapy, I did group therapy, and it was a massive help because I went from somebody who would kind of brood and and like have feelings about certain things or make a suggestion or want to do something, or if someone did something to me that I wanted to just kind of respond with in a way that was like really level and not something that would like cause a fight. I didn't know how to do that, and now that I'm able to do that, it's helped me in every aspect of my life in terms of just like work, personal life, relationships, friends, family, because I'm able to be this kind of level-headed person when things get crazy. Because I understand now the difference between being, and it's called being a rational mind or emotion mind. You want to be in what they call wise mind, and it's helped me a lot in terms of like finding my center and being able to not go into either one of those two realms by themselves. And then the other thing that's helped me too recently is working on understanding so I also suffer from PTSD from my kind of upbringing, and understanding kind of what caused that, and understanding where your negative thoughts and your depression have kind of stemmed from. And it's a lot about grieving what you either never had or what you lost. And there were a lot of things that I grew up not having. Obviously, I had great grandparents who were kind of my second family, and I had my mom. But like, there were a number of things, like I never had a father, and I moved around a lot, and I had issues with friends and all this stuff. And grieving these types of events and these moments that you're kind of taught not to. You just, it happened, it's in the past, you can't change it, you just got to move forward. That's kind of what we're taught. And taking the time to sit down and really, you know feel the sadness for it is something that has really helped me, because you go through all the levels of grief. You go from like the denial to the anger to the sadness to the acceptance, and getting to that acceptance portion is is a great feeling, because you finally release that negative energy or feeling that's been holding you down or tightening your chest. So those are the types of therapy kind of realms that have really helped me.
It's interesting. I pointed this out in our last episode with Kevin Stewart Crow, that Jamel Hill, the sports writer and broadcast personality these days, said that, and this was years ago on Twitter, and it has stuck with me since. She wrote, "You can never outrun your childhood unless you deal with it," and it was just something that hit me in the face. And as you were talking, that resonated in my brain again. And then I wrote something else down that said, why does it take the loudest scream for us to finally be heard? And I say that in regards to you telling the story of having that conversation with your mother about the 3 days. And I know for myself, I've had conversations with people where I have said things, and then when it finally comes to an eruption, their response is, I didn't know. And I'm like, I've been telling you like repeatedly for days on end, weeks on end, years on end. I don't know how you didn't know. And I'm fond of saying we all have a fuse. Some of them are miles long and some of them are inches short. Do you have any thoughts on why it takes the loudest scream to finally get heard?
Yeah, I have a couple memories that come up. I had, for about a year and a half, I saw two therapists because I shifted to my therapy program and the other therapist wasn't part of it. Both of them, almost on a weekly basis, because I would come in and be super depressed and really unhappy. And I'd be like, I cut again this week. And they would tell me, I think it's time to go into the hospital for a few days. And my response every single time was, I can't, I have to work. And I I was raised to be the strong person in my family. I was the person who I remember I had an aunt who told me, "You're the person who has to hold the family together," and that's a great thing to hear when you're like, I have to be strong and things like this. But when you're in moments of weakness, you try to block it out because you're like, no, I have to stay strong. I have to be this person that has to be the rock and holds everything together. And that's what I kept doing time and time and time and time again. And I remember when I attempted, so I went to one hospital and they wouldn't let me leave until I went to the hospital where my therapist was, because he wanted to meet with me and they wanted to make sure I didn't do anything in between. And so I went from that hospital to the other one, and we had discussed weeks on end about going in the hospital. And I just remember sitting down and he just looked at me and he said, I think it's time. And I said, you are correct. um, and I think it's this idea of this mask we have to put on, of maintaining strength, of showing that there's like this mentality. I feel like, I don't think just in the male gender, but I think just like almost in this country, especially Western countries, where we have to separate ourselves from the challenges that we face and the issues that we face, because we have to always look like we know what we're doing. We always have to look like we're on, and that we are, not phased by these outside forces. And if we do, it's a sign of weakness. And it really, really bothers me because it gets to what you were pointing out of, is just it bubbles and bubbles and bubbles and then erupts. And um, I think that both the mentality of our society, which has kind of built that, the gender norms that have built that, but then also our own ignorance. Like I know that's a really negative word, but like I don't think a lot of us want to come to terms or accept the fact that we need help, or that something's going on, because we I deep down, like, I was scared. Like, there were so many times where I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it through this week. And then I would, somehow get through it, and it would just kind of begin that cycle all over again. Um, and I feel like us not being able to like accept that and come to terms with that frightened child that's inside of us is, and because we don't know how to process it, is something that gets to that point where it just explodes.
These are the kind of conversations that I would have run away from maybe 12 months ago. And now I'm running into them. And I had written this down earlier when you said that letting go gave you more control. And it compares to what Sachin Lati said on our show about a month or so ago, when he said, our vulnerabilities give us strength. And this idea that we have to put on this mask and hide all of these things, and it's not easy for people. I get it. But at the same time, it's like, man, it's bullshit. Like, stop putting yourself into a deeper hole by trying to be tough about everything. I lean into my wife. I'll look at her with tears in my eyes and be like, I just can't handle this thing anymore. I just can't do this anymore. And maybe it's because I've been able to have conversations with people like Evan and yourself and the other guys that we've had on this show that allows me to do that. But I have gotten stronger because I've been more vulnerable. And I think what you just said is really important for people listening to our show. So thank you for reinforcing that concept.
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember one of the quotes that constantly, and I know I talked about this the last time we spoke, Jason, that one of my therapists told me was, through the uncomfortability comes progress. And I think that that's one thing that we always forget, is like, we are so in those moments when we're so depressed and we're facing our demons, we are so uncomfortable and we just want to run away and we just don't want to deal with it. But I always tell everybody, like, it sucks in the now, but as you push through it. And it's the same thing with like our negative thoughts. They suck in the moment, but if you push through them, you get through them. And then on the other side is either relief, growth, you know, kind of an acceptance or understanding of kind of the present moment or what's going on. And you become a stronger individual mentally. You know, I agree with you. Like, if you had asked me to talk about this, you know, before even 2019, I would have said you were absolutely nuts. Like, I didn't know how to have these types of conversations. I would just kind of shut down and lock down. But now that I have kind of this, my therapist always tells me that I can be sometimes too self-reflective, but since I have that kind of understanding of kind of how my mind works in a sense, I'm able to sit down, reflect, understand, accept, and move on in a much better way than I never had before.
I I resonate so deeply with that, you know, being a provider and not failing and not like have being able to crumble in those moments. And I think, Jason, I figured out we need to come up with a reverse strongman club. That's going to be like the true strength is in like the sharing and the vulnerability, but we're going to call it the strongman club. But it'll be like, yeah, I got some ideas rolling around now. But I want to turn it to the running aspect now, because I do think it goes hand in hand. And there's no doubt in my mind that you found running during a really difficult time. And we talked about, you know, when you said you grew up and you weren't really an athlete. And I don't think you have to be an athlete in order to run. I think running is one of those things that is like inherently in us. Like, I saw a quote the other day. It was talking about how we are meant to solve problems at 3 miles per hour.
Mm.
We're not meant to solve problems in this like isolated container of like sitting and just dealing with things. And I just loved that quote because it's so true. The amount of things and stuff that I've been able to process and not necessarily like completely fix, but work through as I've been running is pretty spectacular. Now, with your New York City Marathon, sorry, was it the New York City Marathon? It was the Tokyo Marathon that you just did, not New York City, correct?
I just did Tokyo and Boston.
Yeah, that's what it was. Sorry, Tokyo. So with the Tokyo Marathon, I read in the article, because obviously you and I don't know each other, we met today, that the thought that somebody said you couldn't do it is what fueled you to want to do it.
Yes.
So how do you balance proving others wrong, but also like coming at it from like a really positive sense and like staying true to yourself?
Yeah, so I had done when I decided, so I qualified for my first marathon with New York back in 2019. But what kind of it was kind of a duality of the spite portion. But I had done my first 5K in May of that year. I raised money and ran with NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Health, right? Mental illness, for a 5K that they did back down in bottom of Manhattan. And I had never done any sort of race before. I had just done my training runs around Central Park and stuff like that. And the event was fantastic. I had so much fun. I'd never really been competitive in my life. And that was kind of the first moment where I was like, maybe I can get past this person. Can I go around this person? This is, you know, I can't believe I passed this person. They look like they're doing really well. And it was an incredible moment. And, you know, there were no medals. There was no anything at the end. It was just kind of, you cross the finish line and then that was it. Like the score, like the records were like on a piece of paper on the wall, and that was it. And I kind of got bit by the race bug after that. And I had a friend in 2018 whose best friend ran the New York City Marathon, and I used to work by the finish line. I used to work at the Apple Store on Fifth Avenue there, and we would have so many people come in after the marathon in their, you know, their race kits and their ponchos and everything, and I would just be like in awe of what they had done. And this was back in like 2008, 2007. And I was like, you know, man, I would love to run the New York City Marathon one day. It would be but I was like, this is never going to happen. And I was like, I don't run. I don't do anything. Like, this is just like a far-fetched thing. And when I found out from my friend, you know, that she had done the marathon, I was like, you know what? I think I found out about the 9+1 program in New York City with the New York Road Runners to be able to qualify for the following year. And I was like, you know what? I think I want to do it. And this is where the spite part comes in, because my friend told me, well, you don't have enough time. And so I did 9 races in about 3 months and volunteered at one, and, qualified. I think I found that I decided to do it in like June, and qualified by like end of August, beginning of September. And I was really proud of that. I was supposed to run in 2020, it got canceled. So I ran it in 2021. And I'd been bitten by the race bug, but I wasn't necessarily bit by the marathon bug. I was like, I'm just going to do this, see how it goes. Like in my mind, I was like, this is my one marathon, just this is my accomplishment, my goal that I want to say I ran the New York City Marathon in my life. But as I was training and as I was doing more research on the race and I was doing more research on marathons in general, I started to realize that, there's more to running than just running. And you, Evan, you pointed out perfectly the amount of runs that I have been on where I go in with like a mind that's going like a million miles a minute, and I come out of it with not necessarily answers, but with like an idea that's been planted or something that's been thought up, is just like insane. I've thought of so many things on my runs that have really helped me in like every area of my life, not like personally, professionally. Like it's wild. Like I've come up with like Excel documents on my runs. It's wild. Um, and it makes me, it makes those moments are what make me realize that marathon running and running in general uh, is really for the mind, and that has what's kept me running. Sure, the races are fantastic, and I love the energy. Running New York City the first time, I'll never forget coming over the Verrazano and turning on the Brooklyn and the screams that I heard for the first time in my life, and just seeing all the crowds was unlike anything I've ever felt in my life. And it gives me gives me goosebumps every time I think about it, and every time I run the race, it's the one thing that I always look forward to the most.
It's interesting you point out that it was, out of spite, but the reality was your friend was gatekeeping, and in a way, and that is something that you are very vocal against when it comes to running. Whether that's a person running a 15-minute mile or a person running a marathon versus a 5K. And you talk about using your privilege as a platform to allow people to feel comfortable in sport. And whether that's in the LGBTQIA plus community, which you are a very vocal ally of that community, or again, people just getting started in running, right? If you run, you're a runner, essentially. For you, what does that look like in action? And then what are we as a community? And I want to condense it down to the running community. What are we doing wrong that we can improve upon so that allyship just becomes life? It doesn't become this doesn't have a name to it, shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things that look like it in action. I mean, one is just using your voice to tell people that they are wanted and needed and accepted into the running community. I feel like, especially with, and I was talking to someone about this the other day, there's this mentality now in the running community where it's all about comparisons and about how fast can you go, and the people that we follow on social media are the ones that run the sub 3 hour marathons or the 5 minute miles. And that environment that we have, it has, in my opinion, it's very easy to put off people that want to start running, that are kind of how I was in 2018, not physically fit, never run in their life. They run the 15-minute miles. They are afraid to run outside because they feel like they're going to be judged either by how they look while they're running, or their body type, or kind of just who they are. And I think the number one thing that we can do is just be vocal about it, so that those individuals that want to get started running know that they are being heard, and that their qualms that they have, their thoughts about potentially trying to get into running are being seen. I feel like when I started running, I was like, there was nobody out there that was being like, go out and run. And it doesn't matter what your pace is, doesn't matter your finish time, doesn't matter your body type, doesn't matter what your background is. Just go out there and run and have fun. Right. We put this whole emphasis on racing, on speed. And we've lost the emphasis on I get to, and we've shifted to I have to. And I feel like if we get back to the primal thing about running, which is like we get to, the only reason we're able to run is because we get to have a system where we sweat. We're the only animal that has an endurance system that lets us run for long periods of times. And being able to articulate and emphasize that. And it's something that I do, as you've seen, Jason, over and over and over again on my platforms of like that. Go out there and run. It doesn't require the fancy shoes. It doesn't require, the $1,000 smartwatch. It doesn't require you to have a massive training plan or to even have a race lined up. You just have to go out there, buy a pair of shoes and go on the trail, go on the pavement, hit your track, what have you, and just enjoy it. It doesn't matter how far you run. It doesn't matter whether you have to run or walk. Like we have to ensure that people know that it's okay to just do things for fun. I feel like our generations now are very focused on like, I got to make money out of this, or I have to do something where it feels almost like it's got to be forced and it's a requirement. And those individuals that just want a hobby, I feel like are ignored and they're looked down on in some way. And like, I know that there's a big running boom right now specifically with marathons. You look at all the marathons around the world, especially the World Marathon Majors, and they are booked very quickly. And I think that there's just, if I was a runner getting started in running today, I would feel really daunted by the fact that like so many people are running marathons and I'm struggling to run a half mile without stopping. And so ensuring that people know that like it's okay to be starting out. And I always tell people too, when I started running, like there's this whole mentality with runners that like we love running from the very beginning and we just loved it the entire time up until now. Like I hated it. Like it sucked. Like I got on the treadmill and I think I ran for, somebody commented on a post to me today. They said I ran for my first time on the treadmill. I got to like 0.2 miles and I thought I was going to die. And I said, you got farther than I did, because I think I got 30 seconds in and then I had to stop because I literally felt like I was going to throw up. And there's the idea is you have to be good at it already in order to continue doing it. There's no like wiggle room to be building up your endurance and getting to a level that you are able to run for these longer distances with, I don't want to say with ease, but easier than it would have been when you first started running. And we just need to emphasize over and over and over and over again about this. And I'm sorry, what was your second part of your question?
Well, it was about allyship, and I think so. I had a follow up as I was going, so I want to present it this way because it was a few weeks ago. It probably was June 1st, start of Pride Month, and you were very vocal about supporting the LGBTQIA plus community. And I read a comment to you that said, "Hey, dude, I come here for the running content." And I just thought to myself, then you don't know Michael, because his running content includes allyship and it includes being supportive to everybody. And it made me think to myself, like, what are we still doing wrong that somebody is going to show up to a person who is vocal about allyship and say, I come here for the running? Like, you've missed all these other posts then, right? It wasn't their first time because they say, I come here for the running. It wasn't like, oh, this is my first time here. So what are we doing wrong in showing allyship and showing support for the queer community, that somebody still has this belief that you can't be both? You cannot be an ally and a runner. You have to be one or the other.
I think that people have forgotten, and I'm pretty sure you've seen it too. It's been very vocal on social media that running is political. we like to think that running is just running. We go out there and we run races or we do a training run and that's kind of it. But we forget that underneath of that run are all of these things that we have this privilege for. Like you live in a good area that you can go out and run in, either because you feel safe or because you have the like the actual area that you can go out and run in, because you have like spots on the roads, you have sidewalks, all these things. And then beneath that is things like, you have the ability to afford your running shoes. You can afford your running watch if you have one. If you're training for something, you can afford the training plans. And the one thing that I also really stress when it comes to the running community as a whole is this can be the only place for some people where they feel safe, that they can escape from the discrimination and escape from the bigotry that they face on an everyday basis, especially if you're part of the LGBTQIA community, sorry, or if you're a person of color, indigenous runner, a woman runner. There's so many things that they face on a daily basis that it is on us to ensure that the running community that they are part of is one where they can feel like they belong and where they feel like they are safe and heard. And we forget, those of us that have the privilege, those people that are white or those people that live in affluent neighborhoods, that not everybody has that. And I've never, knock on wood, I've never felt unsafe on a run. And I've gone trail running in like the mountains, and it's something that I don't take for granted, because I know that I lived in Queens, I lived in Brooklyn, I lived in Manhattan, but I know people that lived in, the areas of Brooklyn that were not so great, the areas of the Bronx that are not so great. They can't go outside and run. They face so many issues just stepping out their door to go to work or go to school. And the disconnect that we have there of just like, I've seen so many people comment on like, just keep running to running, and that's it, is something that people just don't understand. Of like, there's so many of these other pieces that build up to the ability to run that we just forget about, and we need to make sure that people understand that.
Yeah, I have two comments, and then I want to move into kind of our last segment that we do with everybody here. There's a big problem where people feel safer to go into the mountains with bears, cougars, and other animals than they do running on their own streets in their own neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
That right there, like the number of athletes that I know that feel more comfortable on the trails of the mountains carrying bear spray, like
Mm-hmm.
that to me is just like, it's shocking, right? And I think that's where the social media, I hate even calling it social media now, because it's not even social anymore. It's curated to whatever they think we want to see. It's not even social anymore, right? And I think that's the key. I was speaking with my friend that I'm staying with in San Francisco about this morning, is getting the friendships and the connections off of socials is probably the most important thing that we can all do as a group, is creating these communities and these safe and supportive spaces outside of the social media aspect, because we only get to show like less than 1%. And, people just want to see my running content. Well, I'm sorry, but I also have all these other aspects to me. And if that isn't like being welcomed anymore in that social media aspect, well, then maybe I'm just going to go and create my own offline group of people that I can like lean on and trust and share these things with, that are receptive to that. So I kind of want to make those two comments. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Michael, before we move into the final.
I mean, I almost wanted to respond to that person when they pointed that out, because I remember that comment, Jason, is if you don't like the political post that I make now, you wouldn't have liked me 5 years ago, because I was so vocal. I always joke with people, I don't know how I didn't get fired from jobs for the things I would post online, because I used to go on like Twitter, and I would go to like Ted Cruz's Twitter, and I would respond always like, go fuck yourself. Like, it was just like over and over and over again. And my stuff was public at the time. And so I was like, I don't know how these people haven't found out that I'm doing this or haven't been reported to somebody. I would go to protests all the time. I used to run the Indivisible Network in Queens. And so we would set up, contacting senators and representatives and things like that. And I'm still active now, but I think I'm more dedicated, like specific areas that I want to focus on rather than just generally. Um, and so I agree with you on that, Evan. Like I'm a runner, yes, but like I'm also very vocal about different issues and I'm not going to shut up about them. And if anything, I'm going to find ways to kind of mingle them all together, because if I can connect with runners that necessarily don't think about the things that I post about that are political, and it gets them to start to change their minds and gets them to start to think about things differently, then I've done my job, not just as a running content maker, but as somebody who is trying to bring in change to this country, especially when we need it so bad right now.
Yeah, that's awesome, Mike. So we're going to move into our final segment. So we call this our Stop, Start, Continue part of the podcast. And it's based on the Japanese tradition of misogi. So at its core, misogi is about transformation, shedding old habits, beliefs, and ideas, and really embracing and letting in a new, more powerful version of yourself, all while letting go and surrendering in order to grow. So we have 3 questions. So our first question to you is our stop question. If you had to choose one mental or emotional habit you want to leave behind this year, what would it be and why?
So I suffer from trichotillomania, which is pulling out my hair. It happens a lot when I'm stressed or anxious, and it's my beard that I do. And it's something that I've been working on for probably about 2 years now. And that is something that I would very much love to leave behind this year.
Thanks for that's a deep share. So we appreciate you sharing something like that. Our start question: if you were to commit to a radical mental shift this year that would force you to grow in new ways, what would it be and why?
I think from what I've been working on in therapy is working on that negative mindset that keeps coming into my head whenever I accomplish something or whenever there's anything that comes up that's a struggle, and being able to understand that that critic voice is not necessarily me, but the things that I've been taught throughout my life from other people.
Yeah, my therapist, it's called your little liar and your supportive self. Those are the two that you get to have in your brain at the same time, kind of that devil and angel on the shoulder type situation.
Oh yeah.
Continue question. If you had to symbolically cleanse or renew one aspect of your mental health in the next year, what would it be and why?
I think that would be continuing to meditate. I used to meditate a lot, and it kind of has fallen off over the last couple of years. I don't do it as much as I wanted to anymore, just because of life happening. But I think getting back into it would be very beneficial to my mental health overall.
Michael, thank you so much for this conversation. We really appreciate your vulnerability and willingness to share pieces of your story with us today. Super impactful. We covered a lot of different conversations and topics that I know will resonate with not just men, because I have gotten emails from women and direct messages from women who have said that this show has helped them and has helped them share it with their husbands. So I know that there will be more of those after this episode. Do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom, or maybe a story that you want to leave us with?
I think the number one thing that I just want to say is, when you're in that hole of depression, and when you're in that absorb, like, just the anxieties all around you, you feel heavy, you feel that heat, and you're clammy and sweaty and things like that, and you want it to stop and you don't know what to do. um, the number one thing that I would just recommend is knowing that you are not alone, and reminding yourself that in those times of all of those struggles, there is someone that you can turn to, whether it is someone in your family, a friend, a therapist, or even, if God need be, 911. or the suicide hotline. No, there are so many people that are out there that want to help you, that it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you any less of a person, and it doesn't make you seem like you can't solve your own problems. There's no way for us to fix everything in our lives by ourselves. We are at times our own worst enemy, and have a tendency sometimes to self-sabotage. So I think that being able to understand that you are not alone in your struggles, in your problems, no matter how big or how small they are, is paramount to, one, fighting against toxic masculinity, but two, kind of putting yourself on the road towards, I don't want to say mastering, but being able to grow within yourselves and help yourselves mentally with your own issues that you're facing with mental illness.
I appreciate that. And for those of you who just heard that part and might be struggling, you could always call 988, which is the hotline to help you find some of that help if you're deep into those troubles. On the screen, it says Mike runs marathons. Where else can people find you and dial into what you're doing and what you're advocating for, including running?
Definitely. So I'm on Mike Runs Marathons, Instagram, Threads, TikTok. I have a YouTube channel, but I don't use it as much as I should. So those are probably the three biggest places you can find me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Michael. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And because we do a live show, I want to say thank you to Eshitu Kadiso, who I hopefully did not butcher, but said to Michael's comments there at the end that he is right. On behalf of Evan and myself, we want to thank you for joining us on Enduring Minds. We are a proud part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, one of 9 incredible shows. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and leave a comment on the show, as it will allow us to continue to bring on incredible guests like Michael Brydges and his captivating story, as well as the others, to the Enduring Minds community. Until next time, let's continue going the distance and breaking the silence together.